Terrified woman hands vet a mysterious note. What it said made her dial 911 instantly. It was just a regular morning at the vet clinic. The waiting room buzzed with the usual sound of cheerful voices, soft barking, and the occasional meow. Dr. Bennett had just finished a checkup on a black cat named Luna, chatting warmly with her owner. Everything felt normal, comfortable even. But then the door opened and everything shifted. A woman stepped inside, holding the leash of a golden retriever. Her hands were shaking slightly. She didn't speak, didn't smile. Her eyes kept flicking around the room like she was searching for something, or maybe watching for someone. Just behind her stood a man. Tall, stiff, too close. His hand rested on the small of her back, but it didn't feel like affection. It looked like control. Dr. Bennett noticed it right away. Not just the woman's pale face or her nervous body language, but the way the golden retriever acted too. Most dogs come into the clinic excited or curious. But this one? He was quiet, tense, and stayed pressed against the woman's leg like he was guarding her. The woman moved slowly, filling out the intake form with a shaky hand. The man hovered behind her, watching everything. When her pen dropped to the floor, she bent to pick it up, but the man reached first, placing a hand on her shoulder. She flinched. It was subtle, but Dr. Bennett saw it. That moment changed everything. The assistant called her name, just a soft, "Next." Nothing unusual. But the woman jumped. Her whole body jerked slightly like the sound had startled her. The man spoke for both of them. "That's us," he said sharply, taking a step forward. Finally, Dr. Bennett greeted them with a warm smile and calm voice. She crouched down to greet the dog, trying to create some space, some comfort. The dog didn't move toward her. He stayed glued to the woman's side. That wasn't normal, especially for a golden retriever. They're usually friendly, always looking for attention, but this one looked serious, focused only on his owner. "He's been throwing up," the man said before the woman could speak. "Just give him something so we can go." Dr. Bennett kept her smile and nodded. "Of course, we'll take good care of him. Would you like to come back to the exam room?" she asked the woman. The woman glanced quickly at the man, then back at the vet. "Yes," she whispered, then quickly added, "He's coming too." As they walked to the exam room, Dr. Bennett noticed the woman's slow steps. The dog walked close beside her, his tail low, eyes watchful. The man walked just behind them, silent, with an energy that felt heavy. Inside the exam room, which was decorated with colorful posters and warm yellow walls, the air suddenly felt cold. "Let's get Max on the table," Dr. Bennett said gently. The woman reached to guide the dog, but the man stepped in, grabbing the collar roughly. The dog didn't budge. He looked up at the woman, waiting. She whispered, "It's okay," and he moved. Not for the man, just for her. Dr. Bennett began the exam, but her attention wasn't only on Max. It was on the way the woman's hand trembled as she pet him. It was on the way the man kept answering every question, cutting the woman off every time she opened her mouth. It was on the dog, whose eyes never left his owner, as if he knew she needed protection. Something was wrong. Dr. Bennett had seen a lot in her years as a vet. Animals from good homes and bad, owners who were kind, and some who clearly weren't. But this was different. The dog wasn't just sick, the woman wasn't just nervous, and the man, his presence made the hair on her neck stand up. As the exam continued, Dr. Bennett tried asking simple questions. About Max's eating habits, his behavior at home. When the woman spoke, her voice was so soft it was almost hard to hear. But when she talked about Max, her face softened just a little. She said he loved the park. She smiled faintly when she mentioned how he liked to chase ducks. But the moment didn't last long. The man snapped, "We're not here to talk about ducks." The woman flinched again. The dog looked at the man, and Dr. Bennett made a silent decision. She was going to stay alert. She was going to stay calm. But she wasn't going to ignore the signs. This wasn't just a visit for a sick dog. Something much deeper was going on. Something dangerous. And even though the woman hadn't said anything directly, Dr. Bennett had started to hear her silent message loud and clear. She just didn't know yet how urgent that message would become. The exam room was warm and softly lit, filled with posters of smiling pets and shelves lined with treats and brushes. But inside that space, it felt like someone had turned the temperature down. The tension was thick, quiet, but loud in all the ways that mattered. The woman sat in the corner, barely on the edge of her seat. She kept one hand resting gently on the golden retriever's back, her fingers moving slowly through his fur. Her eyes rarely left him, and when they did, it was to glance quickly at the man beside her, like she was watching for a signal. Or a warning. Dr. Bennett moved through the exam slowly. She spoke in a gentle tone, but her eyes took in everything. The way the woman kept her shoulders hunched, trying to take up less space. The way she flinched when the man shifted in his chair. The way the dog, still calm, still watchful, never once let down his guard. "He's been vomiting for a couple of days?" Dr. Bennett asked, still pretending this was just a normal visit. "Yeah. 2 days," the man answered, arms crossed. "I already said that." Dr. Bennett turned slightly, her gaze landing on the woman. "Have you noticed anything else? Change in appetite? Drinking more water?" There was a long pause. The woman opened her mouth to speak, but once again the man cut in. "It's nothing. He's probably just got into something. Give him something and let's go." Dr. Bennett didn't react. Instead, she spoke directly to the woman again. "Just wondering if you've seen anything different in his behavior. Sometimes dogs tell us things before the symptoms really show." The woman's fingers stopped moving for a second. Then quietly, almost like she was afraid of the sound of her own voice, she said, "He's been sleeping more, drinking more too." The man sighed loudly. "Like I didn't just say that." But Dr. Bennett nodded kindly. "Thank you," she said, speaking only to the woman. That small moment of being heard seemed to shift something inside her. Just a little. Her shoulders relaxed, but only slightly. Her eyes moved to the dog again, and he leaned against her, leg, like he was giving her strength. Dr. Bennett kept going with the exam, asking easy, soft questions. Not all of them were about the dog. "How long have you had Max?" she asked, brushing her fingers gently along his belly. "Since he was a puppy," the woman replied, her voice clearer now. "Got him at 9 weeks. He's 6 now." "Seems very bonded to you," Dr. Bennett said. The woman gave a tiny smile. "He follows me everywhere." And then, almost without thinking, she added, "Sometimes he puts himself between me and things." The room fell quiet. The words hung in the air like they weren't meant to be spoken. But once they were, they couldn't be taken back. The man shifted in his seat. "He's a needy dog. Always has been." Dr. Bennett's hands didn't stop moving, but her thoughts raced. She glanced at her assistant, who passed by the open door just then, pretending to carry paperwork. It was their unspoken signal. A quiet way of saying, "I see what you see." They had learned over the years how to read people, because sometimes, when you care for animals, you start to see what the animals are trying to tell you, and Max was speaking volumes without a single bark. The dog was unusually still, not scared, just aware, focused, like he was ready. Ready to move, to protect, to shield. He never relaxed. His eyes were always moving, between the woman and the man. Dr. Bennett bent to listen to Max's heartbeat, placing her stethoscope gently on his chest. The steady thump-thump told her he was healthy, but something in his body language told her otherwise. He was waiting for something, or bracing for it. As she leaned in, she noticed the woman's hand again, shaking, barely holding still as she stroked Max's fur. "Do you mind if I check behind his ears?" Dr. Bennett asked, stepping around to the other side of the table. "Sure," the woman whispered. The man didn't say anything, but he leaned forward, his eyes sharp. Behind her calm face, Dr. Bennett's mind was already turning. She didn't know the whole story yet, but she didn't need every detail. She had enough. Enough to know something was wrong. Enough to trust her instincts. There was a look the woman kept giving her. Not desperate, not obvious, but every now. And then, when the man wasn't watching, her eyes would meet the vet's, just for a second. And in those seconds, she was asking a question without speaking. "Do you see me?" And Dr. Bennett's quiet nod, her calm eyes, her patience, they were the answer. "Yes, I see you." Max let out a low breath as Dr. Bennett wrapped up the basic checks. The man glanced at his watch and shook his head. "Can we speed this up?" Dr. Bennett didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, she stepped back, washed her hands, and looked at the woman again. "I'd like to run a couple of tests," she said, her voice steady. "Just to be sure." The man scowled, clearly annoyed. "You? Vet's always trying to squeeze more money out of people." "It's not about money," Dr. Bennett said calmly. "It's about making sure Max is okay." The woman nodded faintly, almost like she was grateful for the delay. And in that quiet moment, Dr. Bennett realized this wasn't just a stall tactic. It was time. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing. This was no longer just about a dog with an upset stomach. This was about a woman silently begging to be seen, and a dog who had been watching out for her all along. Dr. Bennett stepped out of the exam room, pretending to head for testing supplies, but her hands were far from steady. As soon as the door closed behind her, she took a deep breath, trying to calm the racing in her chest. Something was very, very wrong, and now she had to act quickly without raising suspicion. She reached into the pocket of her white coat and felt the small, crumpled ball of paper that the woman had silently slipped to her moments ago. The note had been passed in a whisper of movement, smooth and fast, as if rehearsed 100 times in her head. It could have been mistaken for nothing, but it wasn't. Dr. Bennett pulled out the paper and slowly unfolded it with trembling fingers. "Please. Call 911. He has a gun. Don't let him know." The words hit her like ice water. Her breath caught. Her eyes scanned the hallway, instinctively checking who could see her. Nobody was watching. Not yet. She rushed to the small back supply room where her assistant was, organizing paperwork. "Tasha," she whispered urgently, holding out the note. Tasha's face changed in an instant, from calm to horrified. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice shaking. "We need to call 911, quietly. Tell them it's a domestic violence case. The man is armed. We need officers, no sirens, and we need them fast," Dr. Bennett said, her voice low but firm. "He can't know we've called for help." Tasha nodded, already pulling out her phone as she turned toward the private office in the back where the call couldn't be overheard. Her hands were shaking, but her voice stayed level. Dr. Bennett forced herself to keep moving. She grabbed a few vials, gloves, and a syringe, props mostly, and headed back toward the exam room. She walked calmly, like everything was fine. She even smiled at a passing pet owner in the hallway, though her heart was hammering behind her ribs like a warning drum. When she walked back into the room, the man was standing again, pacing slightly. The woman was sitting exactly where she had been, eyes locked on the floor, hand resting tightly on the golden retriever's back. The dog had shifted too, closer to the door, ears up, alert. "Sorry for the wait," Dr. Bennett said, keeping her voice light. "Just gathering some things we might need." The man grunted, not looking at her. but the woman glanced up. Just briefly. And in that brief look, Dr. Bennett saw it. Fear, hope, and trust. Max, the golden retriever, watched her too. He didn't move a muscle, but his entire body was tensed, like a rubber band stretched too tight. He was waiting, guarding, watching. Dr. Bennett began pretending to prep for tests, checking Max's weight, writing fake notes in the chart. The man was growing restless. "This is taking too long," he said, his voice sharp. "You people drag things out just to run up a bill." "We're done here." Dr. Bennett smiled calmly. "I understand your concern, but I need to make sure Max doesn't have something serious. Vomiting and tiredness could mean a few different things." I said. "We're leaving," the man repeated, stepping toward the table. That's when the dog shifted again, not in aggression, but in defense. He placed himself just slightly more in front of the woman's legs, head up, body still. Dr. Bennett saw his ears twitch at the hallway sounds. She also noticed the woman's fingers, tightly curled into a fist. Again, like she was bracing herself. Then, from down the hall, came the faint sound of footsteps. Not rushed, not loud, just calm and steady. But there were more of them than usual. The dog's ears turned toward the sound immediately. He knew. The man did too. "What's that?" he asked sharply, eyes darting to the door. "Probably a delivery," Dr. Bennett replied smoothly, glancing briefly at the hallway. "We have a few shipments this morning." But the man didn't look convinced. His posture stiffened. He reached one hand toward his jacket pocket and didn't take it out. Dr. Bennett could feel it. Everything was on the edge now. One wrong. Word could tip it. She tried to keep him talking. "Just one more minute," she said softly. "Let's make sure Max gets what he needs." But it was too late. The man narrowed his eyes. "You're stalling," he said, voice lowering. "You said this would be fast." And then he said it again, slower this time. More dangerous. "You're stalling." He reached into his pocket. And this time, when his hand came out, he was holding a gun. Everything stopped. The woman gasped, hands flying to her face. Max froze, his muscles coiled like a spring. Dr. Bennett didn't move. Her hands stayed in place. Her voice, when it came, was soft, controlled. "There's no need for that," she said gently. "Let's just stay calm. Everyone's okay." "No." "They're not," the man hissed, pointing the gun at the woman. "This is her fault. She did something. You said something, didn't you?" The woman didn't answer. Her body was shaking now, both hands holding tightly onto Max, like he was her anchor in a storm. Dr. Bennett took a slow step forward. "You don't have to do this," she said, but before he could respond, everything changed. The door burst open. 2 officers stepped inside. Quiet but quick. "Drop the weapon," one of them shouted. The man spun around, gun raised, just as Max launched forward. A single shot rang out. It missed. The dog collided with the man's arm just in time. Chaos exploded in the room. The man was on the ground, officers yelling, the gun sliding across the floor, and then it was over. The man was in handcuffs. Max was back at the woman's side, his body pressed tightly against her as she cried, shaking but safe. Dr. Bennett stood frozen for a moment, watching it all unfold, and then she moved to the woman's side and said the only words she could. "You're safe now." The room felt strangely quiet now, even though it wasn't. Police radios crackled faintly. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Officers spoke in low voices. But for a moment, inside that little exam room, it was just stillness. Like the whole world had stopped to catch its breath. The woman hadn't moved. She sat frozen in the chair, both hands tangled in Max's golden fur, holding on like she might float away if she let go. Her breathing was shallow, fast. Her face was pale, but her eyes were wide open now, not just with fear, but with something else: shock, relief, the realization that it was finally over. Dr. Bennett crouched beside her, her voice soft. "You're okay now. It's over. You're safe." The woman didn't speak. Tears had started to roll silently down her cheeks, leaving trails on her skin that made her look younger somehow. She kept one hand on Max, who had gone perfectly still again, sitting like a soldier guarding her heart. His eyes followed every movement in the room, but his body stayed calm, because she was his focus, his person, and she still needed him. Female officer gently entered the room. She didn't come too close. She didn't speak right away. Just knelt down across from the woman and gave her a little space to breathe. "I'm Officer Reyes. I'm here to help you. There's no rush. Just take your time." The woman slowly nodded, but still didn't speak. Max rested his head in her lap. He let out a deep breath, and she finally moved, just a little, lowering her head to rest it against his. Dr. Bennett stood up and stepped back, giving them room. Tasha was at the door now, her face pale but steady. She walked in carefully, a paper cup of water in her hand. She didn't say anything either. Just placed it gently on the table beside the chair, then knelt down and placed her hand briefly on the woman's shoulder. "We've got you," she whispered. The woman finally looked up. Her lips parted, and her voice came out so softly it was almost hard to hear. "Thank you." It wasn't just a polite thank you. It was a word soaked in disbelief, in gratitude, in exhaustion. One of the officers stepped aside to take a call, his voice low and serious. The others worked quietly to remove the man from the clinic. He didn't resist now. He didn't shout. Whatever energy he'd carried in with him had drained out the moment the cuffs clicked shut, but his words still hung in the air. "You'll regret this," he'd spat before they led him away. His voice cold, ugly, but no one in that room believed him. And for the first time, the woman didn't flinch when she remembered it. "I didn't think anyone would see," she whispered suddenly. "I didn't think anyone ever would." Dr. Bennett came back to her side, keeping her voice gentle. "We saw. Max helped us see." The woman gave a little laugh then, a strange watery sound, half sob and half relief. She looked down at her dog. "He always knew when something was wrong. He never left me." "You don't have to go back," Officer Reyes said, her voice calm but firm. "We'll help you. There are people who do this every day, help women leave, stay safe, and start over. And we're going to connect you with them." The woman blinked, slowly nodding like her brain was still trying to accept that this was real, that the danger was gone, that someone believed her. That help had finally come. Dr. Bennett sat quietly across from her now. "Can we call someone?" "For you? Family? A friend?" "My sister," the woman said. "She's been trying to get me to leave for months. I didn't want her to worry." "Do you want to call her now?" Tasha asked, holding out a phone. "You can use mine if you want." She nodded. Her hands were still trembling as she dialed. It rang once. Twice. "Hello?" came a voice on the other end. Her voice cracked. "It's me." There was a sharp inhale. "Oh my God. Where are you? Are you okay?" "I'm safe," she whispered. "I'm at the vet. Max's vet. He's okay. We're okay." Officer Reyes leaned in. "Let her know we'll give her the address. She can come right away if she wants." The woman passed that on, and within seconds, her sister was on the way. As she hung up, she sat back in the chair like the weight of years had just lifted from her shoulders. Her chest rose and fell in deep, shaky breaths. And then she cried. Truly, cried for the first time. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was the quiet, broken kind of crying that comes after too much fear, too much pretending, too much silence. Max didn't move. He just stayed close, pressing his head firmly into her lap, holding her there in the present. Dr. Bennett glanced at Tasha, and both women knew without speaking. This wasn't just a vet visit. This was the moment someone's life had turned. Not by accident. Not by luck. But because one brave woman found the courage to ask for help. Because one loyal dog refused to leave her side. And because someone, finally, listened. The minutes after the rescue felt like a blur, but slowly, clarity returned. The weight in the room began to lift, like a fog was starting to clear after a long storm. Still, the woman sat close to Max, her fingers buried in his soft fur like she needed the grounding. The adrenaline had drained from her body, and what remained was raw emotion. Grief, fear, exhaustion. And something else, too. Something new. Maybe it was the first flicker of safety. Tasha quietly returned to the room and offered her a warm blanket from the supply closet. The woman pulled it over her shoulders with a whispered, "Thank you." It was such a small gesture, but in that moment, it felt like being seen, like someone had finally noticed she was cold without her having to say it out loud. "Is he really gone?" she asked softly, her voice still catching on the edge of disbelief. Officer Reyes nodded. "Yes, he's in custody. He won't be coming back. And we've already flagged your name in the system. You're protected now." Dr. Bennett watched. The woman slowly began to sit a little straighter in her chair. The trembling wasn't as intense now. Her breathing was more steady. Max, always tuned into her, rested his head in her lap like he'd been waiting for this exact moment, to remind her she wasn't alone. The door opened gently again. A younger woman with messy hair and red eyes stepped in, barely glancing around before locking eyes with her sister. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. The woman stood up. The blanket fell away from her shoulders, and in 2 steps, she was in her sister's arms. They held each other tightly, both crying, not from fear, but from release. Max stood close, circling them once before leaning against both their legs. "I've been calling for days," the sister whispered. "I was so scared, I thought I couldn't answer," the woman said, her voice muffled. "He took my phone. He took everything." "Not anymore," the sister whispered. "He doesn't get to take anything else from you." Dr. Bennett and Tasha stepped back, giving them the moment they needed. Officer Reyes spoke gently to the sister, updating her on what had happened, what would happen next, protective orders, safe housing options, transportation if needed. The clinic didn't have a private office big enough for all of them, but it didn't matter. They made the space work. For now, this was a place of safety, of recovery. "I can't believe how brave you were," the sister said, brushing hair out of her face. The woman shook her head. "I wasn't. I was terrified." "That doesn't mean you weren't brave," her sister replied. "You slipped someone a note while sitting next to a man with a gun. That's courage. Don't you ever doubt that." Max let out a small whine and the woman smiled, genuinely for the first time. It was faint, but real. "He knew," she said, looking down at him. "He always knew when something was wrong. And I think—" Her voice cracked and she paused. "I think he was waiting for me to catch up." Officer Reyes knelt down again. "If you'd be comfortable, there's someone from the domestic violence unit here. She's gentle, experienced, and she can help you with next steps, filing charges, setting up safety plans. There's no pressure to do anything today, but we want you to know what's available." The woman nodded slowly. "Yes, I think I'd like that." Tasha stepped out and returned a moment later with a woman in plain clothes, kind, calm eyes, a notebook in her hand. She introduced herself simply and sat beside the woman, not across from her, like a friend would. The conversation started slowly. Basic questions. "Are you injured?" Do you need medical attention? Would you like to visit a hospital for a full checkup? I think I'm okay, the woman said. A little sore. He grabbed me hard last night and pushed me, but I think I'm okay. If it's all right with you, we'll get someone to check anyway, just to be sure. And it helps us build a record, too. Every bruise, every mark, it helps prove your story. The woman nodded. He didn't always hit. Not hard, at least. Not where people could see. Mostly it was yelling, controlling things, making me feel small. You're not small, her sister said firmly. You never were. You just forgot for a while. They stayed like that, talking gently, planning next steps. The officers coordinated transport to a safe shelter nearby, while the sister arranged to pack a few essentials from her home. Dr. Bennett signed a few necessary forms, filled in the medical report for Max, and walked back in to find the woman stroking Max's ear. He saved me, she said softly, looking up at Dr. Bennett. I think I would have given up a long time ago if it weren't for him. I used to wonder why he always stayed so close, why he always watched me so carefully. Now I know. He was waiting for the day I'd finally ask for help. Dr. Bennett knelt down beside her. And you did. You were smart. You were brave. You made the call, without even saying a word. The woman took a deep breath and looked around the exam room, at the posters, the leash hooks, the cabinets filled with pet shampoo and ear cleaner. And then she looked at the people who had gathered in that small space. Her sister, the vet, the assistant, the officer, the advocate. All of them had played a part, and it overwhelmed her. How do you say thank you for something like this? She whispered. You don't have to, Dr. Bennett said, shaking her head. You already did. Just then, Max let out a soft sigh and rested his chin on her knee. And for the first time in a long time, the woman didn't feel trapped. She didn't feel like she had to shrink into the background or stay quiet. She felt heard. She felt seen. And for the first time, she started to believe something she hadn't dared to hope in years. She was going to be okay. Weeks passed, like a slow exhale. Each day felt a little longer, a little brighter. But healing, she quickly learned, didn't happen all at once. It came in quiet, often painful steps, just like the ones she took when she walked out of the clinic that day, holding Max's leash with her sister by her side. For the first few nights, she didn't sleep. Every sound made her sit up. Every car passing outside pulled her back into fear. Her body remembered more than her mind wanted it to. Doors creaking, the sound of a phone vibrating, even the smell of someone else's cologne lingering in the air. It all triggered something inside her. But Max never left her side. He slept on the floor next to her borrowed bed in her sister's apartment. If she stirred in the night, he'd lift his head. If she cried in her sleep, he'd gently nudge her hand with his nose. And when the sun rose, he'd be there, tail thumping softly on the floor, ready to face the day. She started therapy just a few days after the rescue. It wasn't easy. Talking about it out loud made it feel too real. Her voice would tremble when she tried to explain how it all started. How it wasn't always physical, but it was always something. The threats, the silence, the guilt he made, her carry. The way he turned even the smallest things, dinner, laundry, her laughter, into reasons to shame her. She often arrived at those sessions carrying a cup of coffee in one hand and Max's leash in the other. The therapist never questioned it. Instead, she smiled when Max curled up at her feet, as if he belonged there. Maybe he did. He keeps me steady, she once said during a session. When I feel like I'm falling, I hold on to him. That was the truth. Max wasn't just her dog. He was her tether to the world. He had been her only witness when things got dark, the one soul who never judged her, never turned away, never stopped showing up. Her sister, bless her, did everything she could. She filled the fridge with comfort food. She found a vet who would board Max for free the day of the court hearing. She set up pillows and blankets in the living room for movie nights, and she never once asked, "Why didn't you leave sooner?" Not once. Instead, she asked, "What do you need today?" That question became a turning point, because for the first time in years, she had an answer. She needed space. She needed silence. She needed Max. And slowly, she began to rebuild from there. Prosecutor assigned to her case was kind, but direct. They gathered everything: the note, the vet's statement, the officer's body cam footage, even past reports she'd never dared to file. And they told her something that made her stomach twist. He's not going to walk away from this. It was a sentence filled with both relief and fear. She wanted it to be over, but it meant going to court. It meant seeing him again, speaking about it in front of strangers, reliving it, piece by painful piece. The day before the court date, she sat on the park bench near the duck pond, Max beside her, watching the birds just like he used to. Her sister sat on the other side of her, holding a warm thermos of tea. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I know," her sister said, "but you're not who you were 6 months ago." She looked down at Max, his eyes steady, full of love and loyalty. "No," she said quietly, "I'm not." When the trial came, she walked into the courtroom with Max's worn leash looped around her wrist like a bracelet. He wasn't allowed inside, of course, but just holding it gave her something to grip when her hands started to shake, and she spoke. She told them everything, in clear, simple words. She didn't hide her fear or her shame, but she didn't let it define her either. She told the judge about the silent moments, the bruises, the threats. She told them about how her world shrank to the size of her living room, how she lost herself in survival, and then she told them about the day she found her way out. The day Max sat between her and danger, the day she wrote a note with shaking hands and trusted a stranger to see her. When the verdict came, she didn't cry right away. She sat perfectly still. Then she walked outside and collapsed into her sister's arms. Max was waiting in the car, and when she opened the door, he let out a soft bark, tail wagging slowly like he somehow knew the weight she'd been carrying had finally lifted. She laughed, a real laugh. The kind she hadn't heard from herself in years. That night, she slept deeply. No nightmares, no pacing, just the sound of Max's breathing and the rhythm of safety. Weeks turned into months. She found a part-time job at a local design firm, something she had given up years ago. Her boss let her bring Max in twice a week. He had a little bed under her desk and a jar of peanut butter treats on the shelf. Coworkers loved him, but they didn't know the full story. Only that he was her dog, and that somehow he always seemed to know when someone was having a bad day. She began volunteering too, helping other women at the local shelter, telling her story piece by piece, showing them that healing was real, that safety was possible, that even when everything seems broken, there are still people, and sometimes pets, who will stand by you until you're strong enough to stand on your own. Sometimes when she sat with someone new and scared and unsure, she'd say the same words her vet had once said to her. "You don't have to say much. We already see you, and we're not going anywhere." 6 months had passed since the day she slipped a note into a vet's coat pocket with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. It felt like a lifetime ago. And yet, every now and then, she'd still wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, breath caught in her throat, wondering if it had all really happened. But then Max would nudge her arm with his nose or shift closer to her side, and she'd remember. She was free. Not just physically, but in all the quiet ways that mattered. The fear that once lived in the back of her mind had softened. It still showed up sometimes, in the aisles of a grocery store, or when a stranger raised their voice nearby. But it didn't control her anymore. It didn't define her. She and Max now lived in a small apartment above a bookstore, owned by a retired couple who had been nothing but kind. The building was pet-friendly, and Max had claimed a sunlit spot by the front window as his official lookout post. From there, he watched the world go by, occasionally alerting her to a delivery or a neighborhood cat passing through the yard. Her job at the design firm had turned into something more permanent. She had her own desk, her own projects, even her own corner shelf with a framed photo of Max and a potted plant she was determined not to kill. Her boss said her designs had heart. She smiled when she heard that because for years, she had forgotten she even had one. But the biggest change came the day she stood up in front of a small group of survivors at a local support center. She hadn't planned to speak. She was just there to listen. But when another woman broke down talking about how hard it was to leave with a pet, something inside her clicked. "I had a dog too," she said quietly, and the room went silent. All eyes turned to her. She hadn't meant to share. But the words came anyway, soft at first, then stronger. "I think he knew before I did, that I wasn't safe. He used to sit between me and the bad things. He would block me without making a sound. I didn't realize what he was doing until it was almost too late." She told them about the vet, the note, the gun, the police. She didn't give every detail, but she gave enough to let them know they weren't alone, and afterward, one woman pulled her aside and said, "I didn't think anyone would understand the pet part. Everyone tells me to just leave the dog behind, but I can't. She's all I have." "I know," she replied. "I couldn't leave Max either, and you shouldn't have to." That conversation led to a new project, a local partnership between the Domestic Violence Center and area vets to create a safe pet boarding program for survivors who needed to leave quickly. Dr. Bennett was the first to sign on, without hesitation. "We're not just here for the animals," the vet said when they met again. "We're here for the people who love them too." She and Max returned to the clinic for regular checkups. They always got the same room, not the one where everything had happened, but a different one, a fresh start. Still, the receptionist always met them with a knowing smile. And every time they walked through that door, it felt like stepping back into a story that had started with fear and turned into freedom. One sunny afternoon, she and Max visited the park they used to walk when everything still felt broken. But this time, there was no rushing, no looking over her shoulder. She brought a blanket, a notebook, and a coffee. Max sprawled beside her, belly to the grass, eyes half closed in the breeze. She opened her notebook and started writing, not just memories, but something more. A blog, a series, a collection of stories for women like her, for the ones who stayed too long, for the ones who were still waiting for the right moment, for the ones who had a loyal dog beside them, refusing to leave. She titled it, "The Quiet Ones Who Stay, Stories of Survival and Love." Each entry ended the same way. You are not alone. You are not invisible. And you are not too late. Sometimes, she still caught herself looking back, wondering who she might have become if she hadn't written that note, if Max hadn't stayed. So close, if the vet hadn't seen what no one else had. But then she looked around at the life she had now. The quiet mornings, the work she loved, the women she helped, and the dog who still slept with his paw resting gently against her leg. And she knew this was exactly where she was meant to be, not because of luck, but because of courage, because of choice, because of love, the quiet, unshakable kind that stays, even when everything else falls apart. Max opened his eyes then, lifting his head to look at her. She smiled, reaching over to scratch behind his ears. "We did it," she said softly, and he didn't answer, not with words, but he didn't need to. His eyes said it all.